Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs will come to order. Thank you all for joining us, the witnesses, all of you in the audience and members of this committee. The fentanyl crisis is one of the gravest threats facing all of our communities. Every year, 5,000 Ohioans, one state alone, 5,000 Ohioans die from unintentional drug overdoses. In 2022, a staggering 110,000 Americans lost their lives as a result of unintentional overdose. A moment ago, Mr. DeFord said in the hall that it's the equivalent of a 747, I believe you said, going down every day. Imagine each year losing a city nearly the size of Dayton, Ohio, or North Charleston, South Carolina, or Billings, Montana, or Wilmington, North Carolina. Behind all those numbers, most tragically are stories of families torn apart, of parents losing teenagers before they graduate high school, of grandparents stepping in to raise grandchildren. No matter where you come from, pretty much everyone has a fentanyl story. It may be your own family, it may be a neighbor, it may be a coworker. We've all lost someone or know someone who's lost someone. It's a crisis that cuts across all geographic lines. It's certainly across all partisan divides. It's why it has been and will continue to be a top priority of this committee. I thank Mr. Scott for his work on that. We've taken bipartisan action, we'll continue to. With Ranking Member Scott and the entire committee, and now 67 co-sponsors, we worked in a bipartisan way to design a new sanctions program, the Fentanyl Act, that can help reduce the flow of fentanyl into our communities. And this committee, our purview, as you all, I think, know, is often money. We use that authority to hit the cartels and chemical suppliers directly where it hurts their bank accounts. The cartels that traffic these drugs are billion-dollar from Mexico are billion-dollar operations. Our bill goes directly, follows the money after those billions. China is the main source of precursor chemicals for illicit fentanyl, supplying the cartels in Mexico who then traffic the fentanyl into the United States. Chinese entities often help them launder the money for the Mexican cartels. The new Economic Sanctions Authority and money laundering penalties, which will be created by the Fentanyl Act, will go after all of these components of the illicit fentanyl supply chain and will help stop more at its source before it ever reaches our communities. Now, when we talk about sanctions regimes and directing the Treasury Department to block assets, the discussion can get pretty technical and pretty sterile far too quickly. It's why the focus of today's hearings on the human toll that illicit finance takes on our families, on our friends, on our neighbors. Our focus today is why this work matters, why we must finish this job, why we need to get this bill signed into law. We're going to hear from Mr. Jason Jelly Roll DeFord to testify about his personal experience in communities that have been devastated by the addiction crisis. I'm guessing most of you didn't have Jelly Roll testifies at Senate Banking Committee on your 24 bingo card. But few speak and sing as eloquently, as openly, as, shall we say, viscerally about addiction as Mr. DeFord. There's a reason why Americans flock to his music and his concerts. He has a connection with people based on shared pain, shared challenges, shared hope. Today, we'll also hear from National President of the Fraternal Order of Police, Mr. Patrick Yoes, about his members' work in the front line of the response. Mr. Yoes, thank you for your work with our office on a whole host of things, from the Helper Act and so much else. Law enforcement officers live this crisis every day in their work. One of the best ways we support them is preventing fentanyl from flowing freely into and through the communities which they serve. Mr. Christopher Urben, a veteran DEA agent, will describe the trail fentanyl and its proceeds take. Thank you for joining us too. This crisis has many dimensions, including border security and public health and demand reduction and economic stability. Everyone has a role to play, the three of you and so many others. Sadly, no single step is going to make this problem completely disappear. We know that. We aren't or shouldn't be in the business, though, of false promises. What we do is take an all-the-above approach to reduce as much pain and save as many lives as possible. Fentanyl is often mixed with other substances, including cocaine and xylazine. I'm a co-sponsor of the Combating Illicit Xylazine Act, which establishes penalty for manufacturing and distributing and dispensing xylazine for illicit use. We should also pass my Bipartisan Power Act, which would provide state and local law enforcement with high-tech, portable fentanyl screening devices. I thank President Yoes' organization for their support of that legislation. I've also demanded that Treasury hold the governments of China and Mexico accountable for curbing illicit fentanyl trafficking. It's clear that the Mexican and Chinese governments are not doing enough to combat the flow of fentanyl. We need specific benchmarks for combating fentanyl trafficking in the opioid crisis and more information regarding the role of the recently announced Treasury Department counter-fentanyl strike force. It's vital we effectively monitor the administration's effort to stop fentanyl at its source. I call my colleagues to use their membership on committees to explore legislation on other committees too, to explore legislation that will help us treat addiction, improve our public health response, stop the trafficking of illicit fentanyl into our communities. A crisis this massive, this multifaceted, demands our sustained focus. It's my pledge as chair of this committee, my pledge to the 12 million people who live in my state. It starts with getting our bill signed into law. Fentanyl, as I said, and I will close with this, passed out of our committee unanimously, written by Senator Scott and me and our staffs principally. I think my colleagues would agree we're a diverse group. There's not a lot, almost nothing this committee finds a complete unanimity on, but we're able to find common ground on an issue vital to all of our states and our country. And our colleagues in the Senate agreed, passing this with overwhelming bipartisan support as part of the Senate, as part of the, through the Senate of the NDAA bill. The House needs to finish the job, needs to get this bill to the president's desk. It's our chance to show the people we serve that we can work together, we can put partisanship aside, we can take action on things that actually matter to their lives. Families, law enforcement, and all our communities are counting on us. Let's get this done. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for each of you being willing to testify before us today. And thank you, Jelly Roll, for the shout out on the fentanyl legislation last night at your concert. It's so important for Americans to come together around such an important issue, ending the fentanyl crisis that is devastating family after family after family. I think specifically of Alan Shaw in Charleston, South Carolina, a friend of mine who lost his son, Alan Shaw II, to fentanyl. The devastation that has ravished the family is immeasurable. And anything that we can do as a body to make common sense reforms, to hold those accountable, and to stop the cash flow that funds fentanyl is absolutely essential that we get it done right now. And unfortunately, we're here today having another hearing on fentanyl because our friends on the other side of the Capitol, because of the shenanigans at the end of last year, didn't get the bill included in legislation that would have made this, I believe, law already. It is incredibly unfortunate that playing politics is still a game played in Washington, especially on something so important. And I think, as the chairman just said, he and I probably don't agree on very much, most consistently, but I will say, having 22 or 23 of us vote unanimously on this committee, having 6 to 8 of us on the same piece of legislation, and not to have a chance to get it done, it's not just frustrating to those of us on this committee, those of us in Congress, it's incredibly frustrating to the people of our country who watch the devastation eat away at their communities. Congress needs to come together to stop the Mexican cartels, the Chinese chemical suppliers, and the money laundering organizations from profiting off the production and trafficking of fentanyl, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans. Put simply, we should all value the health, safety, and security of Americans. When I think about the path of destruction fentanyl has carved across the United States, it's truly jaw-dropping. Preliminary CDC data shows that in 2022, 75,000 Americans lost their lives to fentanyl. In my home state, that's 1,500 South Carolinians in 2022 alone. The national death toll equates to losing the entire city of Wilmington, Delaware, the president's hometown, each year just from overdoses of fentanyl. And for every life lost, our community feels the impact. What impact? It's the mothers, the brothers, the fathers, the children who've lost a loved one and who try to pick up the pieces because we have a southern border that is so wide open of 48,000 pounds of fentanyl come right through it. Fentanyl's destruction has impacted every single one of us personally. I would say that probably half the room knows someone whose lives have been devastated, whose families have been destroyed because of fentanyl. But let's take a step back and look at how we got to this point over the last several years. Under this current administration, America is facing the worst border crisis in our nation's history. And the president's disastrous policies have turned the fentanyl epidemic into a national crisis. The CBP reports that fentanyl seizures have soared over 860% since 2019. Our Border Patrol and DEA are working as hard as they can, seizing record amounts of fentanyl at our ports of entry and across our country. But tragically, for every amount seized, we know even more is trafficked on our streets. That's why we must take a two-pronged approach to addressing the fentanyl crisis. Number one, we must tackle the physical front by securing our border. That's why I've introduced both the Allen T. Schall II Fentanyl Public Health Emergency and Overdose Prevention Act, as well as the Secure the Border Act of 2023. These bills would expedite the processing and removal of migrants illegally entering the country and properly fund and bolster security measures along our southern border. Number two, we must attack the criminal financing of the fentanyl trade by enforcing our money laundering and sanction laws. That's where this banking committee comes into play. My bill, the Fentanyl Act, which is bipartisan, is critical to helping stop this illicit financing. I want to once again thank the chairman and all the colleagues on this committee for working together in a bipartisan fashion for the health of this nation. FEN makes combating fentanyl a top national security priority for the United States, and once enacted, will maximize our ability to leverage sanctions and anti-money laundering tools against illicit Mexican and Chinese organizations that traffic deadly fentanyl. Follow the money is a tried and true investigative strategy that must be employed more forcefully to combat fentanyl trafficking in the United States. Cartels and criminals that profit from our devastating losses must be stopped. And to do that, we have to hit them where it hurts, and that's their wallets. The illicit money engine needs to be turned off, and it needs to be turned off now. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act makes clear what we all know too well. The fentanyl crisis facing America is a national emergency and must be treated as a national health emergency. Americans cannot afford us to wait. I am grateful we have a panel here today that is willing to share their perspectives, their personal stories, and support for our legislation. I look forward to hearing from each witness on this critically important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. I'll introduce today's witnesses. Again, thanks for the three of you for joining us. Mr. Jason Jelly Roll DeFord is a two-time Grammy nominee and CMT Music Awards winner. He sings about and advocates for those facing drug addiction. He consistently speaks directly with and for people struggling with addiction across the nation. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for serving your nation. Mr. Patrick Yoes is the National President of Fraternal Order of Police. President Yoes, through his local law enforcement career, has held pivotal law enforcement leadership roles at the state, local, and national levels, and thank you for serving communities in our nation. Mr. Yoes. President Yoes and Mr. Christopher Urben is currently Managing Director at Nardello and Company. Before that, he was a special agent in charge at DEA. He's a recognized expert on counter threat finance and anti-money laundering investigations. Thank you for your career, long career serving the public. Start with Mr. DeFord. Welcome. For your first committee hearing, I assume.
Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. I'm used to having a rock and roll band behind me when I have a microphone in front of me. During the time that I've been given to share my testimony here, I think it's important to note before I start that in these 5 minutes I'll be speaking that somebody in the United States will die. of a drug overdose, and it is almost a 72% chance that during those 5 minutes, it will be fentanyl related. Having started that way, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and esteemed committee members, thank you for having me. I know this is a bit of a curveball, but I like a little baseball myself. My name is Jason DeFord, but to most I am known as Jelly Roll. It is important to establish earlier that I am a musician and that I have no political alliance. I am neither Democrat nor Republican. In fact, because of my past, my right to vote has been restricted. Thus far, I have never paid attention to a political race in my life. Ironically, I think that makes me the perfect person to speak about this because fentanyl transcends partisanship and ideology, gentlemen and women. This is a totally different problem. And I was speaking outside to the media, and I gave them a statistic that said 190 people a day overdose and die every single day in the United States of America. That is about a 737 plane. That's what about a 737 aircraft can carry. Could you imagine the national media attention it would get if they were reporting that a plane was crashing every single day and killing 190 people? But because it's 190 drug addicts, we don't feel that way. Because America has been known to bully and shame drug addicts instead of dealing and trying to understand what the actual root of the problem is with that. But the sad news is that narrative is changing too, because the statistics say that in all likelihood, almost every person in this room has lost a friend, family member, or colleague to the disease known as addiction. I've attended more funerals than I care to share with y'all. This committee, I could sit here and cry for days about the caskets I've carried of people I loved dearly, deeply, in my soul, good people, not just drug addicts, uncles, friends, cousins, normal people. Some people that just got in a car wreck and started taking a pain pill to manage it. One thing led to the other, and how fast it spirals out of control, I don't think people truly understand. So many people. Equally, I think it's important for me to tell y'all that I'm not here to defend the use of illegal drugs. And I also understand the paradox of my history as a drug dealer standing in front of this committee. But equally, I think that's what makes me perfect to talk about this. I was a part of the problem. I am here now standing as a man that wants to be a part of the solution. I brought my community down. I hurt people. I was the uneducated man in the kitchen playing chemist with drugs I knew absolutely nothing about, just like these drug dealers are doing right now when they're mixing every drug on the market with fentanyl, and they're killing the people we love. I'll be honest with y'all, my desire is to only get older and only do better and be better. I believed when I sold drugs genuinely that selling drugs was a victimless crime. I truly believe that, y'all. My father always told me what doesn't get you in the wash will get you in the rinse. Now I have a 15-year-old daughter whose mother is a drug addict. Every day I get to look in the eyes of a victim in my household of the effects of drugs, every single day. And every single day I have to wonder, if me and my wife, if today will be the day that I have to tell my daughter that her mother became a part of the national statistic. History repeats itself, gentlemen. Even in the 1990s, crack cocaine had long made its way into my middle lower class neighborhood. And at that moment, even as a teenager, you could have never convinced me in that moment that there would be a far bigger problem on the horizon in the form of a pharmaceutical drug. And then I watched opioids and Oxycontin burst onto the scene. I'm here to tell y'all that fentanyl is going to make the Sackler family look like saints. And I want to let y'all sit with that for a second. It is time for us to be proactive and not reactive. We were reactive with crack, we were reactive with opioids, and y'all are taking the first step at somebody in Senate finally being proactive. I truly believe in my heart that this bill will stop the supply and can help stop the supply of fentanyl. But in part of being proactive, gentlemen and women and ladies, I have to be frank and tell y'all that if we don't talk to the other side of Capitol Hill and stop the demand, we are going to spin our tires in the mud. Y'all are taking the first step, but I encourage you to take it outside of this room and you take it to your colleagues and your constituents and you give them the most that you can. I know I've got a few seconds here, and Senator Brown said I may or may not go over. All I want to say is that I not only encourage y'all to do this, I encourage y'all to take it a step further. At every concert I perform, I witnessed the heartbreaking impact of fentanyl. I see fans grappling with this tragedy in the form of music that they seek solace in music and hope that their experiences won't befall others. They crave reassurance. These are the people I'm here to speak for, y'all. These people crave reassurance that their elected officials actually care more about human life than they do about ideology and partisanship. I stand here as a regular member of society. I am a stupid songwriter, y'all, but I have firsthand witnessed this in a way most people have not. I encourage y'all to not only pass this bill, but I encourage you to bring it up where it matters, at the kitchen table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeFord. President Yoes, welcome.
Well, thank you, and good morning, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of this committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to provide a law enforcement perspective on how we can step up our efforts in the fentanyl epidemic that is killing Americans at an alarming rate. In 2021, more than 100,000 Americans died from drug overdose, and 65% of which have been attributed to fentanyl. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, overdose death rates exploded between 2015 and 2021 by nearly 750%. Fentanyl and fentanyl analogs were found to be the main driver in drug overdoses. The U.S. Drug overdose death toll in 2022 is estimated to be, or was estimated to be at 110,000, primarily from synthetic opioids like fentanyl, making them the leading cause of death of Americans aged 18 to 49. Drug cartels use precursor chemicals sourced by China to manufacture pills that are intentionally made to look like prescription medications like OxyContin, Percocet, and Xanax. The Drug Enforcement Administration estimates that of these fake pills, 40 to 60% of them are often bought on social media and are laced with a deadly dose of fentanyl. Taking just one of these can be lethal. Overdose deaths continue to rise despite joint efforts by DEA and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, both of which have partnered with state and local law enforcement agencies to prevent fentanyl and similar opioids from getting into our communities. The DEA alone estimates that it sees more than 379,000 potentially deadly doses of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs, yet the death toll continues to rise. As law enforcement officers, my members are on the front line, and they know firsthand just how devastating this drug epidemic is in our communities. We are typically the first to respond to a 911 call about a potential overdose. Our role goes beyond just interdiction and enforcement. We help preserve the sanctity of life. Many, but not enough, officers have access to Narcan, a life-saving medication that can reverse the opioid overdose if given in time. Law enforcement officers and other emergency medical responders likely save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives across this country every single day. Sadly, law enforcement officers experience every facet of this devastating drug. We work to stem the flow of fentanyl into our communities, to capture and punish those who deal the drugs, to save the lives of those who overdose, and when tragedy strikes, we deliver the news to the families of their loved one that was killed by this poison. We recognize the nature of the threat that our country is facing. We must do more if we are going to end or mitigate the deadly impact of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs to our citizens. We need a fully comprehensive national strategy to reduce overdose, disrupt traffic operations, attack traffickers and cartels with sanctions, and prioritize anti-money laundering efforts related to the illicit opioid trade. The Fraternal Order Police was proud to work with Ranking Member Scott and Chairman Brown to develop Senate Bill 1271, and could not emphasize enough the need to get this legislation moved. It has a bipartisan support, and so it should on both sides of the House, and approved this committee last summer, and it should be passed by the Senate as quickly as possible. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act will direct resources of the U.S. government to target the fentanyl supply chain, from the chemical suppliers in China to the cartels in Mexico smuggling into the United States, by requiring the president to impose and enforce sanctions on criminal actors and organizations, increasing the likelihood that those who defy the law will be caught and prosecuted. We also support the use of lawfully forfeited assets of these traffickers to further law enforcement efforts to combat these criminals. The bill authorizes the Treasury Department to use special measures to combat money laundering operations related to the trafficking of fentanyl and similar opioids. This will reduce the profitability of drug trade and bring those profiting from the deaths of American citizens to justice. All of these measures and tools in Senate Bill 1271 will reduce the number of Americans who suffer and die from fentanyl and fentanyl analogs and other deadly illicit opioids. And that should be our number one goal. We can and must reduce the loss of life by vigorous interdiction and interdiction of the drug supply chain, relentless pursuit of dealers and cartels and suppliers, greater availability of Narcan for law enforcement officers and responders, as well as passing the Fend-Off Act. We need all of these tools in our toolbox to handle this deadly epidemic. And if I could change the subject briefly, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your leadership in Senate 1514, the Helpers Act, which would create a home loan benefit program for first responders and educators based on the United States Department of Veterans Affairs home loan program available to veterans of our nation. It is important to our members to address the recruiting challenges that law enforcement is facing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to mention that here. I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to be here today and share the perspective of the 373,000 members of the Fraternal Order of Police on this issue, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, President Yoes, and we are going to continue to work to pass the Helper Act until we get it, till it happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Urben, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you on additional measures needed to combat the massive threat of fentanyl and other narcotics trafficking. This drug poses an enormous threat to our homeland. It has murdered hundreds of thousands of Americans, destabilized Mexico, destroyed communities, and harmed the integrity of our financial institutions. Significant new tools, including those in the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act, known as the Fend Act, are needed to address it. I witnessed the damage done by organized crime and drug trafficking firsthand during my 24-year career with the DEA. We targeted leadership of transnational criminal organizations that were trafficking drugs into the U.S. and laundering crime proceeds through U.S. financial institutions. In 2018, I was assigned to DEA's Special Operations Division, known as SOD, where I formed a team that was focused on a new and evolving threat, Chinese money laundering organizations known as CMLOs. We took this step because we were receiving reports from the field that Mexican drug cartels were using Chinese money laundering networks in increasing amounts to launder their cash. Agents in the field reported that Chinese money launderers guaranteed immediate payment to the traffickers in their home countries at a cost of only 1% to 2%. That was previously unheard of. This new Chinese money laundering model was a dramatic improvement for the Mexican cartels because they achieved greater profits more quickly with less risk than more traditional forms of money laundering, such as the black market peso exchange and bulk cash smuggling. Here is how the scheme works. Every day in the United States, the proceeds from the sales of fentanyl and other dangerous drugs are generated in the form of bulk cash, U.S. cash. Those proceeds in this example are delivered to a Chinese money laundering broker in the U.S. so they can be laundered. Once that bulk cash is received by that broker, the funds are advanced to the Mexican cartels in Mexico. They are made whole at that point. The Chinese money laundering organization then sells those U.S. dollars to Chinese customers who want to spend money in the United States. This money can be used to fund investments, acquire real estate, cars, pay college tuition, and just purchase chips at a casino, among other things. These Chinese customers pay a broker in China for the cash they purchase within the United States. Funds received by brokers from customers in China are used to buy goods for export to Mexico or another country where transnational criminal organizations operate. Once those goods arrive in Mexico or, again, another country used by transnational organized crime, they are sold and the proceeds are delivered to another Chinese money laundering broker, and in this example, Mexico, and it returns the money to the funds they had already advanced to the Mexican cartel. The Chinese money launderers make money at every stage of this transaction and accomplish all this quickly and efficiently. I refer the committee to my written submission, which contains a simplified graphic depicting this scheme. What makes this scheme so effective and hard to detect? First, it minimizes the movement of funds. Dollars don't leave the U.S., pesos don't leave Mexico, and the RMB does not leave China. Second, It takes advantage of the huge and increasing volume of trade with China and the existence of capital flight controls within China. Third, it uses technology to its advantage, transacting primarily via WeChat, which is an encrypted network that is resistant to surveillance by U.S. law enforcement and that facilitates speed and trust within the Chinese money laundering network. Again, a very important component to this. Fourth, it exploits the fact that financial institutions and other domestic recipients of Chinese origin funds are unfamiliar with Chinese money laundering networks. That said, the scheme has several potential vulnerabilities that are not being fully exploited, but could be with the aid of the FEND Act and other changes. Unlike some traditional money laundering schemes, proceeds never leave the U.S. and can be frozen or seized. Financial institutions, transnational criminal organizations, and Chinese money laundering organizations maintain detailed transaction data that can be exploited by law enforcement with the aid of targeting analysts and data scientists. At my current employer, Nardello & Co., I'm helping the business community understand and combat the threat posed by the cartels and their enablers. But more federal guidance, more sanctions, more enforcement activity, and more resources are needed. The FEND Act addresses each of these needs. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to answering your questions and any future discussions with the committee and its staff about this very important issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Urben. I'll begin with Mr. DeFord. Through your music, you've managed to make people across different communities feel heard by speaking about the challenges and struggles Americans face. When we spoke briefly before the hearing, you used the term, you're a man of service. I've heard you say that publicly. You said it privately. I appreciate that. It's part of your recovery that people recovering from addiction need to have a group of people speaking for them that look like them. We have experts who speak to numbers and stats, but from your point of view, describe the everyday struggle of addiction, if you would.
I mean, it's nothing less than devastating. It is truly the biggest crisis I've seen in America. I'm sad. I'm almost 40 years old, Senator Brown and Senator Scott. I have lived long enough to see almost every form of drug that has came across since the 80s. And I grew up in a household that had multiple addicts and alcoholics in that household. I have seen drugs from an early age, and I can tell you that every alcohol I've seen and every drug I've seen, nothing has held a candle to what's happening with fentanyl in the United States of America. I'm seeing people shatter. I'm seeing families get broken. I'm seeing, like I spoke about in my speech, it's important to note that the real victims there's a quote that says, the addict isn't the only person in the family that suffers from the symptoms of the addiction. The entire family suffers with the addict. The entire family rallies around the addict and carries that. The addict is not the only victim in this. It spreads far.
Thank you. Most of us up here can't sing all that well, but what we can do is legislate. What kind of signal would it send to the people you talk to who struggle to feel heard and seen if we come together in both houses, as we have in the Senate, 23-0 here, and then the Senate floor? If we can do that in the House, what kind of signal will be sent to the people whom you're fighting for?
It's immeasurable. It's immeasurable because from the outside looking in, we don't see nothing happening in D.C. except fights. All we see is war and all we see is division. And it makes us feel unheard and unseen, and it makes us feel like our problems will always get caught in the middle of some kind of a partisan issue. And you and Senator Scott coming together in this committee has taken the first step that I think could be the beginning of the change that is needed in America, not just D.C., because this isn't the only bipartisan bill that needs to be spoke about. It's the mountain in front of us. But there are many mountains behind that one that must be spoke about too. And I applaud y'all for taking the first step, because me being here, I know for sure that some of my people are watching this right now, and for the first time ever, we feel heard. The voiceless feel like they have a voice in Washington, D.C. today, and I carry that with pride as I stand here with y'all.
Thank you. President Yoes, tell us about how this crisis affects your officers, your FOP members, and other officers, both the physical threat of toxic exposure and the psychological burden of dealing with overdoses and really the devastation caused to families and communities by fentanyl.
Senator, it really is a two-part. One of them I'll talk just briefly, and that is just a potential exposure of our members themselves to these poisons, just in our normal enforcement of it and coming in contact with it. But I think really the one that we I guess maybe underestimate. Law enforcement officers are human. We struggle with a lot of things as well, and this repetitive trying to fix the problem, trying to assist those that are overdosing, and then having to deal with the families after to carry this tragedy back to them. We're human, and it takes a toll on us as well, and it's happening over and over and over and over. And that repetitive effort, repetitive action to our members, it certainly takes its toll on the mental being of law enforcement officers as well. It's time to get a handle on this. Every single day. I mean, what makes a crisis? Is it 1,000 people a day? Is it 500? Is it 110,000 a year? Because that's what it was last year. We have a crisis here. And talking about it is not going to get us there. We need the tools in order to be able to address it, and address it on multiple levels, not just in the enforcement side of it, but also the families and those that are affected by it as well. This has to be a multifaceted approach. Every spoke on the wheel needs to be working, and we need to break this up. We need to take away the profit of those that profiting from the slaughter of Americans, and we need to take it. And as long as it's profitable, they're going to continue to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. When I hear that all the time, what you said, officers from Ashtabula and Cincinnati, FOP members, deputy sheriffs, other police officers from Toledo to Athens, and thank you for saying that. Mr. Urben, you described better than I've ever heard sort of the follow the money. Senator Scott and I, when we talk about this, both of us have talked about principally you follow the money. China and Mexico, you've talked how that money makes its way into all three societies so well. What is, in the last minute or two, I'm sorry for not giving much time, how does fentanyl, how does it unearth that? How does it attack that? How does this bill help us follow the money?
So it's offensive operations against the money laundering networks. Certainly in my career, following the money was what led me to success against transnational organized crime around the globe, whether it be Russian organized crime, Hezbollah, Mexican cartels, Colombian cartels, what have you. But FENDAT itself, and the common theme I've heard is unite as a country. What I suggest is during my career is imposing justice on our adversaries. It was always satisfying and rewarding bringing those traffickers to justice, whether it be in the Southern District of New York or elsewhere. And in terms of the FENDAT itself, sanctions can impose costs on the Mexican cartels. Sanctions, aggressive sanctioning, a platform set up. Sanctions usually take historically 6 to 9 months with an indictment. The FENDAT, with the funding and the focus that I see behind it, you want to go something more like 4 to 6 weeks without an indictment. So you want to act with speed against our adversaries, whether they be the Mexican cartels, the Chinese precursor facilitators, or the chemical companies itself. The AML and compliance, the additional oversight, will allow law enforcement to connect the dots. And I can get into data targeting later, but the additional oversight that the FENDAT wants to have within AML and institutions will allow law enforcement to target these networks better.
Thank you, Mr. Urben. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Start with you, Mr. Urben. You mentioned WeChat and WeChat Pay and the role that it plays in moving the money around. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
So I want to talk about WeChat and the example I gave, and that it allows for speed and trust within the network. So never in my career with the DEA has a criminal organization had the benefit of an encrypted global network that they could communicate on. And what I mean by trust is U.S. law enforcement does not have the ability to intercept WeChat. We can't wiretap it. So if you compare that to 10, 15 years ago when I ran an undercover money laundering team to attack the black market peso exchange, you could wiretap the network. You can't do that with WeChat. The speed that I talk about, and an example I gave earlier in my opening remarks, these transactions or communications happen within a day. It used to take 7 to 10 days, but WeChat allows for that speed because it's trusted within the Chinese money laundering network to communicate. They can rely on the person they're speaking with is a person that they can rely on to complete that transaction, where again, the black market peso exchange was mistrusted, and they enforced the movement of money that it would flow through violence. You don't have violence. The Chinese money launderers have absorbed all the risk. But in terms of WeChat, that's an encrypted application that, whether it's additional legislation or a negotiated strategy within our executive branch of the government, we need to be able to impact WeChat so it's not a benefit to the Chinese money launderers.
Thank you very much. That's such an important part of the conversation about how money can move around without total anonymity, total privacy, and a very rock-solid system that eludes or evades capture and law enforcement in our country. And I'd love to have a deeper dive into solutions for that as we have an opportunity to talk later on as well. Thank you very much. Jelly Roll, quick question for you. As you know, your family in Charleston, the Probsts, are very close friends of mine. I called them just to say, hey, tell me about Jelly Roll. The one thing they said was that he is authentic, he is sincere, and he speaks about the issues that has impacted his life.
Yes, sir.
And as a kid who grew up in poverty, I will say that sometimes the unseen and the unheard feel invisible. And one of the things that you're doing today is you're making visible those who still today feel like because of who they are, where they live, or what they do, they are somehow invisible. The challenge, of course, with drug addiction is it doesn't know a class or a race or a place. It's everywhere. Can you talk about the fact that, indeed, what we're talking about today impacts across all segments of our society in a devastating way?
Senator Scott, thank you. I was hoping to share this, so you bringing it up means a lot. I have the opportunity to go sing at dozens of rehab facilities a year and dozens of jails and prisons. Every time we do a show in a city, we go to their local jail or their local rehab and sing songs for them to encourage people. And in rehabs across America, I can tell you with certainty, I have seen everything from governors' children's in the same rehab as kids that have been homeless since they were 12. I mean, when I tell you that this drug, it has finally reached to the point, like I said, that we used to look at addicts and shame them, but now it's hard to because the rest of the world's finally realizing that the addict is actually their nephew. It's their cousin, and they know their cousin was a good person. They know that this isn't the actions of the cousin they know. They know this is the actions of the drugs. Senator Scott, Chairman Brown, I assure you that this touches every single human, white, black, every ethnicity, every race, everywhere in the United States of America. It is touching and hurting people and killing people. And that's why what y'all are doing is so important. It's bringing people together. It's making the unseen fiends felt seen. The voiceless have a voice, and we can't thank y'all enough for it.
Thank God that Congress can come together, not in a bipartisan way, but in a nonpartisan way to address the issues and the challenges facing Americans all over this country. And I certainly hope that my friends in the House are paying attention today, because it not already being law is a travesty. And I certainly hope my colleagues on the other side of the Capitol will take up this fend off fentanyl and get it done.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Menendez of New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in order to combat the fentanyl crisis, it's important to understand how these opioids are getting into the country. Mr. Urben, is it accurate to say that the vast majority of fentanyl trafficking comes into the country through official ports of entry?
Most of the fentanyl comes through official ports. It usually comes across the Mexican border, most of the fentanyl coming into the country.
But through official ports of entry?
Most of it, a majority of it probably does, yes, sir.
Yeah. Here's the facts. In 2021, over 90% of fentanyl seizures occurred at legal crossing points. Just 279 out of 1.8 million arrests by Border Patrol of illegal border crosses resulted in fentanyl seizure. So it seems to me that in the first place, if we are serious about it, one of the elements of this challenge is stopping fentanyl from coming into the United States, we would significantly increase resources to combat the flow of fentanyl across the border. we would think about dramatically enhancing our technology capability at those official points of entry where the vast majority, the 1.8 million arrests were taking place. And that would help us dramatically stem the flow. In order to make real progress in the fight against fentanyl, we have to hold foreign governments, such as China and Mexico, accountable to their commitments to crack down on producers and traffickers of synthetic opioids. In November at the APEC summit, China and the United States announced the resumption of bilateral cooperation on counter-narcotics, but we need more than words at this point. Mr. Urben, from your experience, what has China done to crack down on Chinese pharmaceutical companies that manufacture fentanyl and fentanyl precursors?
There's been limited, action within China from my perspective since I've left government in terms of doing that. During my time in government, I did not have insight within China in terms of what they were actually doing. We had certainly an office within the embassy there for DEA, and it had limited cooperation with Chinese law enforcement. We're trying to build that relationship at the time.
How about Mexico? What have they done to crack down on the drug cartels that mix fentanyl with other drugs and smuggle them into the United States?
So I think they, in a very difficult situation concerning the cartel's power and reach and ability to corrupt Mexican government components, they've done to some degree what they can under the circumstances, but it's been very limited in terms of their ability to counter or negate the ability of the Mexican cartels to traffic fentanyl here.
And these are two of our big challenges. The answer to both questions, in my view, is not enough. I appreciate that President Biden raised this with President Xi when they were at that summit. But this is why in 2019 I introduced the Fentanyl Sanction Act, which provided the U.S. government with tools and resources to sanction illicit traffickers and producers in China and Mexico. And why last year I introduced the Strengthening Fentanyl Sanctions Act to expand and extend those authorities. We have to try to reach abroad as well as we deal with issues domestically and put pressure on them. And certainly the Fentanyl Act is a very strong start. But I think there's other things that we can do as well. Lastly, I'd like to echo the chairman's support for the Fentanyl Act. It's a bipartisan bill. It authorizes practical and common sense steps to hold bad actors accountable. It builds on existing laws to better combat the flow of illicit opioids into the United States. I'd like to highlight a provision that I got into the bill that requires the Department of Treasury to report on actions taken by the People's Republic of China with respect to persons involved in the supply chain for fentanyl and fentanyl precursors. We can't not solve the fentanyl crisis within our borders alone. We have to address the international components of the supply chain as well. And do you believe those provisions of the bill, the Fentanyl Act, that reaches beyond our borders are important as well?
I think they're critical. I fully support your statement that we have to essentially attack these networks outside the country to help protect the country. The sanctions component that you spoke about, and that's also in the Fend Act, is something that needs to be used more offensively and in greater in scale, and I mean dramatically greater in scale, with speed. So again, versus 6 to 9 months in indictment, which takes a long time and a tremendous amount of resources, you want to dramatically increase the scale and the targeting and sanctions tool against these networks, whether it be Chinese precursor chemical facilitators, the chemical companies themselves, or anyone that's helping to facilitate this within Mexico, which is a variety of different components, sir.
Thank you. I hope our House colleagues will move quickly. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Tillis of North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DeFord, where'd you grow up in Antioch?
Sorry, I grew up between Priest Lake. I lived in Priest Lake for a while. Are you familiar?
I grew up in Trailer Park on Richards Road, went to Antioch High School.
Really?
Class of
Look,
78.
Yeah, we lived off, I was born in Bavaria Apartments off Haywood Lane.
I think they call it Country Meadows now. but
Yeah,
it's right there.
I lived in Country Meadows at
Mill
one point.
Creek.
It's right next to Apollo Apartments, right next to Pop's old
That's
car
exactly
wash.
right.
Yes, sir. I'm very familiar with
I
that
went to
trailer
Apollo Junior
park.
High School. I also had friends who got convicted for drug trafficking and had one commit suicide after substance abuse really took his life. But one thing I've noticed One thing you said that I think's very important. You said you see a lot of fights up here, and there are, but there's some good stuff that happened. And one that I hope I can get you updated on is a bill that we passed last year called the Safer Communities Act. Because I'm sure you know, if you've looked at this the way I have, a lot of the people who are in addiction are self-medicating. They get there because they have behavioral health problems, they have trauma problems, they have a lot of challenges. We passed a bill last year on a bipartisan basis. Some of the folks on this committee voted for it, others didn't, but it's working very well. And it's helping expand behavioral health access. And we need help educating states like Tennessee, where I spent a lot of time, now I live in North Carolina, so that while we continue these fights, there's some good stuff that came out of this chamber on a bipartisan basis that will save lives. So we won't spend time educating you on this, but I'd love to have the opportunity to educate you on this so that we can make sure it gets implemented well in Tennessee. I'm doing my part in North Carolina. But thank you for being here. I'd look forward to the opportunity to speak with you separately.
I'd be honored. I believe that mental health and drug addiction go hand in hand.
We have this bill that in a pilot form, and one of the states that implemented about 7 years ago, we had a 50% reduction in mental health incarcerations. 50% reduction statewide. That says a lot about folks getting vectored into care that really makes a difference. So I'd like your help on promoting that and look forward to meeting with you. I also think we have to talk about the border talk. There is a fight going on right now on border security, and this is why you should be concerned with it. It looks like a fight, but we have cartels making about $1 billion a year, charging people a fare to get across the border, anywhere from $5,000 to $55,000 to come across the border illegally. They are making, according to the DEA, somewhere on the order of $1 billion a year now, and they are plowing that money right into poisoning our country. They have these things called the Sinaloa Air Force, where they're taking ultralights and landing, coming across the southern border, landing, dropping off drugs. Senator Menendez is right. The majority of them are coming through legal ports of entry. Part of that can be fixed by technology, but a part of it can be fixed by actually having Border Patrol patrol the border and legal ports of entry versus being engaged in the millions of people coming across the border illegally. We have to realize that we have to fix this, and we have to interdict more drugs, and we do have to hold China and Mexico more accountable. Mr. Urben, the China, we have to continue to pound the drum that China is poisoning over 100,000 people a year, and as Mr. DeFord said, about 70% of them are likely dying from fentanyl. But what more can we do to disrupt the money laundering? The cartels, the Mexican cartels don't launder money the way they used to. Now they call 1-800-CHINA, and they have a global network where they're laundering this money right before our very eyes. What sorts of policies should we take up to make that more difficult and disruptive?
So I think there's a couple of components there. One is we need to understand that we have home field advantage when it comes to money laundering, and what I'm talking about specifically within the domestic United States. Those bulk cash proceeds that I spoke about earlier are right here at specific points in time, but they always start right here within the United States. So we need to attack the networks and the money. It's the proceeds we don't focus on enough. That's where the Mexican cartels and Chinese money launderers are vulnerable, right? That's where they're vulnerable. So in terms of attacking those networks, we need additional AML compliance and oversight.
Because my time's limited, Mr. Yoes, I'll submit some questions for the record for you, because there's also a public safety issue with law enforcement I'd like to get to. We're not going to have time. But isn't it also going to require, I'm not necessarily big on regulations, but if we don't start figuring out the use of crypto and digital assets as a way of of really masking the laundering activities, I think we're going to miss a lot of what's going on. Do you agree with that?
So I certainly agree that crypto needs additional oversight and AML compliance. It's one component of the money laundering cycle that I spoke about.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Mr. DeFord, I am sincere when I say well, it looks like we lived in the same trailer park, but we also have a common background, and I'm very, very serious. I need help educating people, not once and done. What we do here is excuse me, you pass a bill and then you hope something happens. I want to make damn sure what happened in the 5 states that implemented, excuse me, implemented the Safer Communities Act happened in Tennessee and across the country.
Yes, sir. You have a friend in me. I'd love to talk.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFord, though it's not obvious, he graduated a few years before you did. Yeah.
It's also obvious he might be the only person in here as Southern as I am.
I don't think so, actually. Yes, the guy sitting to your left and a few people up here, John Tester isn't one of them, Senator Tester from Montana.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott. And yeah, you haven't heard from Senator Kennedy yet. That's coming. I want to, first of all, thank the Chairman and Ranking Member for their leadership, not only in having this hearing, but also in the bill, the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act. It is long past time that this bill get passed. I think that Ranking Member Scott said it right. The shenanigans in the House need to stop, and we need to get some stuff done. I had a bill on China buying farmland. They stopped that. Wrong thing to do, but for probably political reasons they did it. But why they would stop this makes no sense to me. We need to categorize fentanyl as a national emergency that it is. We do need to hold China accountable for its role in this crisis. And we need to give law enforcement, border agents, the tools that they need to be successful. And in that regard, I want to thank each and every one of our witnesses for being here today and for your testimony. I think it's really important. I want to follow up a little bit on what Senator Tillis was talking about on the cash. Okay, the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act is a bill that we passed here, bipartisan, nonpartisan, big numbers, and the House screwed it up, which is what they tend to do most of the time anyway. But the cash issue is not something that we've talked a lot about, and the money laundering issue isn't something we've talked a lot about. You started to answer his question. I want you to finish that answer on what we need to do on this side of the dais to have some impacts on the money laundering aspects.
Thank you, sir. So I was touching upon additional AML compliance at financial institutions. They need additional oversight, and they need to better track with suspicious activity reports what's transpiring with Chinese money laundering. In addition to that, I think there's a tremendous opportunity with data, right? You can pull the data that I'm talking about that's on WeChat. So we go out, DEA goes out and does 10 arrests on a Chinese money laundering cell. If you pull all that data in from search warrants, judicial process on laptops, phones, and elsewhere, you can normalize that data and kick out targeting packages immediately to the field, right? So we're missing that opportunity with speed. We need to impact these organizations with speed. So in terms of funding and approach, there's an opportunity with data to go after the Chinese money laundering networks. The last one is the encrypted app that I talked about with WeChat. We have to be able to surveil and intercept that.
Let's go back to the AML. You're saying this money laundering, a fair portion of it, is going through our banking system right now, our regulated banking system?
That's correct. When the Chinese money laundering organization sells the dollars back to a Chinese customer that wants to invest or spend money in the States, the day before, those were the proceeds of the narcotics trafficking that we're talking about. So it is going into the system, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Yoes, I want to thank you for your support of not only the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act, but the Anti-Drugs Act that I have. You talked in the testimony about the impact it has on your fellow police officers handling this poison. And I have two questions. Number one, from a on-the-street standpoint, talk to me about how the Fend-Off Fentanyl Act will make a difference.
Well, Senator, I think the age-old problem that we will all have and will have after we leave, and it'll be on our next crisis, is that criminal enterprises are operating at a pace that is much further than we can make decisions and fix these problems. I think the Fentanyl Act is so very important because it gives us extra tools in order to be able to combat this. But the reality is this is just going to be the first step.
Yeah.
This is an evolution, and in order for us to have any meaningful impact, we need to do two things. And it was spoken here earlier. We got to operate at a faster pace. There's no reason whatsoever there's anyone here in Washington should be against finding ways to save and protect Americans from something that is clearly a crisis. And we need to stop. It needs to move at a much faster pace if we're going to keep up with those people that we're trying to combat. The other side of it is that it's frustrating to one, being overloaded, trying to deal with this crisis, trying to manage it with the manpower that exists, adding all of the other challenges that we have in law enforcement associated with it. And that is something that's always going to be a challenge. It's always going to be outpace what our resources are, and something that we need to give some attention to. But this, I think this bill is a huge step in bringing us in a direction, give us some tools in order to be able to take as long as we have, it's profitable to do this, we're always going to be behind. We got to find a way to be able to break it up, and I think when it comes down to really following the money, regardless, it's always going to evolution. It's always going to evolve. There's always going to be new challenges for us, but I think we have to find a way to, at a much faster pace, be ahead of it. And this bill certainly puts us in that right direction.
Mr. DeFord, I'm out of time, but I just want to say thank you very much. Your testimony was incredibly powerful, and what you do every day to impact lives for the better in this country is something we need to take notice of. And I don't know if you've ever been to Montana, but anytime, any place, you're welcome to come up, because I think your message needs to be heard all over this country, including rural America. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Would love to see you there.
Thank you. It's a pretty state where you live. It's a pretty state where you live.
Oh, man, it's heaven.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized. What's his chart?
Candidly, gentlemen, there's not much that Congress can do to make President Xi stop his country from producing the precursor chemicals. I've met with President Xi personally in Beijing. I don't think it did much good. And candidly, there's not much the United States Congress can do to make President Lopez Obrador in Mexico stop the cartels. He knows what's going on. There are two things that we can do. First, we, meaning Congress, we can secure the border. It's an open, bleeding wound, and it is wide open. And it is wide open by design. I've seen it. Most of the members of this committee have. That's not what I want to talk about. The other thing that Congress can do is crack down on the dealers, not the addicts, Mr. DeFord, the dealers. Now, Mr. Urben, see this pencil?
Yes, sir.
This pencil tip, the amount of fentanyl just in a pencil tip, as represented by a pencil tip, will kill you dead. Dead as fried chicken, Mr. DeFord. I hope that's Southern enough for you. You see this, 40 grams?
Yes, sir.
This will kill every man, woman, and child in Culpeper, Virginia. Not far from here. If you have this much fentanyl, you're a dealer. This is 400 grams. This will kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, you're a dealer. You're not holding this much fentanyl. You're not dealing. Now, 40 grams. This will get you, if you get caught, a minimum of 5 years. Okay? 400 grams, if you get caught with this much, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, and many more before you step on it, this will get you 10 years minimum. There's just one problem. We punish other drugs less severely than we do the most powerful drug, fentanyl. I mean, just look at it. 40 grams, 5 years. 400 grams for fentanyl. 10 years. Methamphetamines, 5 grams will get you 5 years. 50 grams will get you 10 years. Much less severely than fentanyl. We do the same thing for PCP. We do the same thing for crack cocaine. What you allow, gentlemen, is what will continue. Now, I support the Fentanyl Eradication Act that we've talked about today, but I also support something else. I support another bill, the Fairness in Fentanyl Sentencing Act. And it would lower the 5-year mandatory minimum threshold from 40 grams of fentanyl to 2 grams. And it would lower the 10-year mandatory minimum for 400 grams to 20 grams. And we ought to pass it too. What you allow is what will continue. I'm going to yield back, Chairman Brown, my 14 seconds to make up for my past transgressions.
It doesn't, but that's fine. Senator Warner of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to tell you, I think my friend from Louisiana makes a very powerful point, and I agree with him. Was a little concerned that you cited examples of how many folks dying in Virginia and Tennessee, and you made no analogies to Louisiana communities. But it is we see this on the intel side. It's not exactly like they got great quality control, and a few literally the equivalent of grams of sugar misplaced can make the difference between a drug experience and a death. And I know other colleagues have raised, not going to be the direction I'm going to go today, but I see, as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, how often, and I don't start with a huge bias against crypto, and I think there are distributed ledger opportunities, but boy, oh boy, the amount of times that crypto is used as a way to have these illicit payments made is something we've got to grapple with. So I thank my friend from Louisiana. I'm going to start with a slightly, maybe a little bit lighter note, because I want to acknowledge Mr. DeFord and personally thank him. I know you were in Bristol, Virginia recently for a concert, and that you actually went next door to Abingdon and saw the softball team and kind of cheered them on. I'm grateful for that. And I know you recently as well were closer to Richmond and visited a prison in Chesterfield.
Yes, sir.
I'd love you if you could share briefly with some of the experiences you felt, particularly with some of that prison community in Chesterfield.
The HEART program, sir, is what it's called, and that sheriff down there has really got his hand on what he's doing. There's another sheriff in Flint doing great things that are similar. He is focused on rehabbing drug addicts in jail. It's actually the only jail in the United States of America that will allow you to come in without a crime. If you are just a drug addict that wants to get off the streets and no rehab will take you and you are indigent, they will allow you to come into that jail and join the HEART program to get sober. And I think that's incredible. But, sir, I do that as often as I can, and rehabs all across America. And the saddest part is you just see the same thing. You just see heartbreak and despair. But yes, sir, that was incredible. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because that guy in Chesterfield really has that sheriff really has his hand on the pulse of what's happening in America.
Well, thank you for being willing to share your story.
Respectfully, not for a pat on the back, but we also donated our proceeds from the show that night to them. We cut the Chesterfield County Jail, the HEART program, I think a $30,000 check.
Well,
So
kudos to you. Thank you. And I'm also for maybe less prevalent, but visiting the softball team in Abington.
I was cheering for him, man. I paid for him to go to the championship. I'm always going to be a cheering for him.
Well, grateful for that. Thank you. On a more serious, well, it's all within a serious note. I'm going to turn to your colleagues up here, and I'm chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and one of the most important tools we have in the intelligence community is part of FISA called Section 702. Mr. Chairman, I was recently just in Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. 702 is being used not just daily, but almost hourly in our efforts in helping our Israeli friends ferret out some of the Hamas leadership. But 702 has also been critically important in exposing the role that the Mexican drug cartels play, and frankly, in exposing the active engagement of the Chinese government. I know my clock's ticking here. Everybody involved in the drug battle against this killing drug realizes 702 is a critical component. It's going to expire in April. Senator Rubio and I have put forward a broad bipartisan reform bill that protects Americans' privacy, eliminates the ability to use any of this information to pursue any kind of criminal charge, changes the, and remember 702 is one foreigner talking to another foreigner abroad. There may be inadvertent contact with Americans. My clock's ticking down, but gentlemen, Yoes, Mr. Urben, if we were to lose that 702 capacity, what would that do in terms of our ability to give you the kind of enforcement tools you need against the bad guys?
Senator, the short answer is it takes a very important tool out of our toolbox in order to be able to combat this crisis.
Mr. Urben?
Yeah, I second that. We're already at a disadvantage targeting the cartels in terms of gaining intelligence, so that would put us at a greater disadvantage. You need that tool.
And I can just assure you, we are open for reform, but the idea that you have to have a search warrant before you act on any of this information, when frankly, the vast majority of inadvertent American contact comes in the form of victim notification who've been victim of cyber attack and others from foreign entities. So again, those of our colleagues that see otherwise, I hope they'll give me a chance to make a case of how important this critical tool is, not only in terms of the president's daily brief, in terms of conflicts around the world, but also in terms of giving our law enforcement the tools they need to go against the bad guys in fentanyl. And Mr. DeFord, thank you again for what you've done in Virginia. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Senator Haggerty of Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Brown, and welcome to all of you today. I'd like to start with you, Mr. DeFord. First, I'd like to congratulate you on being named CMA's New Artist of the Year. That's quite an award, and it's great to see another Tennessean here at the Capitol, so welcome to you. I'd like to stay on our state for a minute.
Yes, sir.
Our state is facing a grave threat from drug overdoses. In fact, we have the #2 mortality rate in the nation in Tennessee. And according to the Tennessee Department of Health, the majority of these overdoses are linked to illicit fentanyl.
Yes, sir.
Every time I talk to Tennessee sheriffs, they tell me that each month is worse than the month before it in terms of drug overdose and drug trafficking. And if I get to what's causing this, the fentanyl's being made from Chinese precursors that's coming into Mexico where it's manufactured there, then it's being smuggled across our southern border. In fiscal year 2023, Customs and Border Protection seized 26,000 pounds of fentanyl at the border. And that's only the amount that we're catching. Senator Menendez talked about the amount that we're catching at the ports of entry. Well, that's where we have sophisticated equipment to screen. But what's evident is with the rising death toll that we've got, more and more of this is flooding across our border, beyond the points of entry. And we've got to use our resources across the entire border to stop the flow of fentanyl. I'd like to come back to you, Mr. DeFord, and to your experiences here. Here in D.C., I think there's often a disconnect between what's happening in the bubble of Washington and what American citizens are actually experiencing across the country. I think your unique experience can help bridge that divide. I was very touched by your opening remarks, and in particular, your comments about addressing the demand for fentanyl as well as the supply. We're here talking about a bill that addresses the supply, but I would love to get your perspective on how we might address the demand. I know you've thought a great deal about this.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's incredible to meet you, Mr. Haggerty, Senator Haggerty. Being a Tennessean, I am very, very respectful of all that you've done for our state. Not only do we have the second biggest mortality rate, Nashville actually was the second most dangerous, deadly metropolis in America for fentanyl behind Baltimore. I had a meeting with our mayor about it recently, and just to the actual demand of it, I think there's not a proper education about it. I don't think there's enough resources for people to learn about it. There's not enough affordable rehabilitation centers in the state of Tennessee. These are all things I'd love to talk about. I think we're scheduled to hang out with each other soon anyways, and I would love to discuss with you. But I live in a very juxtaposition here where I understand the drug dealer and the addict because I have played the position of both. And unrelated, but to Mr. Kennedy's point, I agree with you, Senator Kennedy. I believe that chart is about as ass backwards as it could be, excuse my language. But Mr. Haggerty, I thank you for asking. And I only said that I see this bill as truly helping stop the supply. But as always, the problem with Capitol Hill is that's a bunch of y'all in here fighting to fix half the problem, and we do have a whole problem here, Senator Haggerty.
Well, I look forward to continuing our discussion about that when we meet together later today.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank you. I'm
for being
excited.
here. Next, I'd like to talk about the way we deal with the sort of violations that take place with respect to fentanyl. On December 16th of 2022, Attorney General Garland released a new DOJ policy that restricts the charging of crimes with mandatory minimum sentences and discourages prosecutors from charging the most serious, readily provable offense. The DOJ soft on crime policy states that, quote, it applies with particular force in drug cases, which include fentanyl traffickers. So my question, Mr. Yoes, to you is, what happens to law enforcement morale when prosecutors either refuse to prosecute or they minimize penalties that are sought for drug crimes, including fentanyl crimes?
Well, I think there's a bigger picture here, and that is that you know, the majority of violent crime in every community is committed by a small percentage of people, and certainly the drug trade.
That's certainly what the sheriff and the chief of police of Memphis told me too. They know exactly who they are.
So when we're able to apply pressure and take people off the street who prey on the people within our communities, we have an impact on the quality of life in a community. When we're unable to do so, then we see the problems that we see in a lot of cities across this country. It is a challenge for law enforcement to put our efforts into trying to make our community safe, only to see a revolving door of the criminal justice system. It's something we've been speaking of for quite some time. At some point, we need to recognize that what we're doing is not working. You apply enough pressure, it eliminates some of this criminal activity, and the quality of life goes up.
I'd like to just make one very simple point very quickly here. Does the failure to strictly enforce drug crime laws tend to increase or decrease drug overdose deaths?
I think it's connected to every part of crime within a community, quality of life within a community. To somehow suggest that recognizing the damage that's being done by the drug trade within our areas and view it as a nonviolent crime is not accurate.
No, it's clearly leading to more deaths on our streets. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Haggard. Senator Warren of Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. So fentanyl killed more than 78,000 Americans last year, including more than 2,300 people in Massachusetts, and crypto helps fund that death toll. Crypto plays a role at every stage in the illicit fentanyl trade. Chinese companies sell the chemical ingredients used to make fentanyl to drug cartels, and they get paid in crypto. The drug cartels and the traffickers sell their deadly drugs in the darkest marketplaces, and they get paid in crypto to the tune of about $1.5 billion in 2022. And drug kingpins buy weapons and cars and make payoffs, again, using crypto. Now, the Trump administration's DEA spotted this problem 5 years ago. In their 2018 threat assessment, they said that cryptocurrencies, quote, offer traffickers a relatively secure method for moving illicit proceeds around the world with much less risk compared to traditional methods. And since then, the problem has only gotten worse. Take one case. Last year, the Department of Justice indicted a Sinaloa cartel member who laundered nearly $900,000 in crypto by directing their U.S.-based drug couriers to deposit cash straight into the cartel's crypto accounts. And what did they then turn around and use that crypto for? They reinvested in the cartel's fentanyl factory so that they could pump more fentanyl into the United States. Now, Mr. Yoes, thank you for your work and for the work of hundreds of thousands of police officers in the United States who are on the front lines in the opioid crisis. You've seen the various tricks that drug traffickers use to move their drug money around. So if I can, let me ask you, why do you think cartel members find crypto such an attractive option?
Well, Senator, thank you. Thank you for those comments. And I don't portray myself to be an expert on crypto.
Fair enough.
But I will say that I think what we see is an evolution. That evolution is crypto today. It's going to be something later. I think it's just the next thing that we have not. It's in law enforcement, we follow the money. It just makes it harder to follow the money. So I think the fact that it's a emerging. There's a lot of things that we still need to figure out about this, and I think that's what the appeal is to it. We're a little behind in truly understanding how to use it in a way that helps us combat crime.
All right. So, Mr. Urben, you have decades of experience at DEA following illicit fentanyl funds. Why do you think crypto has become so attractive?
It allows for speed.
So you can move it fast,
Yes.
unlike
Senator.
cash, which you've actually got to physically carry.
It's larger. You physically got to carry it. It's much more difficult to conceal.
Okay.
So there's speed. There's to some degree anonymity, and then they can hold that asset and transfer and move that asset easily. So they're exploiting the organized crime, the Mexican cartels, the lack of compliance and oversight within the crypto industry.
Just a lot easier to hide it? Is that basically what you're saying here?
It's easier to hide. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So, make no mistake, drug traffickers are also still moving cash the old-fashioned way. But crypto has changed the game by allowing criminals to move boatloads of money instantaneously and nearly anonymously. No need to try to stuff $900,000 in cold hard cash into a suitcase and worry about whether some customs agent will spot it. Now cartel members can move as much money as they want using a handful of crypto wallets. Holes in our anti-money laundering laws have given drug dealers a back door to move their dirty fentanyl money around, and that back door is wide open, and it's helping fuel the opioid crisis at home. Mr. Yoes, if cartels and drug dealers and Chinese chemical companies can keep exploiting the holes in our anti-money laundering rules and keep funding the fentanyl business with crypto, what's that going to mean both for law enforcement and for families across this country?
Senator, it's not a matter of can. They will.
They will.
They will, and they do, and they will continue to do it until we find ways to close those gaps.
All right. Well, it is about closing the doors, and that's why 20 senators, including 7 right here on the Banking Committee, are working to pass a Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act that closes these loopholes in our money laundering rules. Crypto shouldn't get a free pass, and I look forward to working with all of my colleagues to finally fix that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Senator Vance of Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for personal privilege for 10 seconds?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay, JD? One of my staff members and colleagues is leaving for the private sector, Mary Kirshner. And she's done an extraordinary job for the people of Louisiana and the American people. She's here today. I wanted to recognize her and thank her for her service. Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Kennedy. Senator Vance of Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Senator Vance.
Yeah, of course, and congrats, Mary, and best wishes to you. Thank you for your service. Thanks to the chairman and the ranking member for having this important hearing, and thanks to the 3 witnesses for being with us today. I wanted to focus a little bit on this question. When we talk about fentanyl trafficking in particular, I worry a lot that we're always in this body a few years behind what's actually going on in our country. And I think back to my own very personal experience with opioid addiction in my family, and 10 years ago, what everyone was talking about was prescription painkillers. But of course, 10 years ago, prescription painkillers were sort of giving way to street heroin. And then 5 years ago, everyone was talking about street heroin, but heroin was kind of giving way to fentanyl. And now we're all talking about fentanyl, and we should, of course. It's extremely dangerous. It kills a lot of our fellow citizens and orphans a lot of our kids. But I wonder whether we're missing the next thing, and I'd like us to maybe get ahead of the next thing. In particular, I'm worried about, and I am nitazines, or zines is sort of it's commonly called on the street. And Mr. Urben, I want to focus my questions towards you because, as I understand it, nitazines, I should say, are actually substantially more potent than fentanyl. And I've even talked to people just in the past few days who've been able to order this stuff on the internet, comes directly to their door, and they're dealing with a street drug that is substantially more powerful than what we give, pregnant women in a hospital who are about to deliver a baby. This is extraordinarily potent stuff for people to just be able to order via mail. I want to sort of start out just there, Mr. Urben, and kind of understand. So, am I right to assume that when the CCP started cracking down on fentanyl under pressure from the Trump administration in 2018-29, we actually saw a pretty significant reduction in fentanyl coming into the country from the CCP. Is that correct?
Fentanyl coming in directly from mainland China via parcel, there was a significant reduction, yes, sir.
Okay. So here's, I guess, my question. Maybe just give me a sense of what you're seeing when it comes to nitazines. How much have we seen a significant increase in this stuff? Are we seeing a larger number of people killed by this stuff? Like what's going on? Am I right to worry that nitazines are today what fentanyl was 5 years ago?
I think you're right to worry. I think your thought process in terms of trying to get ahead of this and create speed to identify the network and what they're distributing on the street, whether it be controlling it, whether it be emergency scheduling, whatever DEA suggests in terms of what they're seeing on the street, whether it be the streets of Kensington with one of these zines. The cartels, whether it's the Chinese chemical suppliers or the Mexican cartels themselves, will always look to exploit more deadly, more addictive substances within our country. So I think the plan you want to put into place and what you're suggesting is the ability to think ahead, to plan ahead, to negate it.
Yep. So I'm going to ask a question, and recognizing you work for the DEA and are not a State Department official, so if you don't feel comfortable answering this question, let me know, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you think about why people might deal drugs, so the obvious answer is greed, right? People want to make money. That's one reason why you might sell nitazines or fentanyl or anything else. But do you worry that there's a kind of a national security or a national competitive element to this? I mean, China is fundamentally a state-controlled economy. Do you think that they're aware of what's going on? Are we sort of witnessing something like a reverse opium war, where they are intentionally allowing this stuff to come into our country because it's killing 120,000 people a year, and it's significantly impairing a lot more than that?
So in general, when I was with the DEA and we focused on the China threat, I did not have insight within mainland China with the CCP and directly what you're saying. However, I do think they can dramatically increase their efforts to negate the precursors of chemicals and everything we're talking about with Chinese money laundering that's happening on WeChat. And that could happen and should happen, and it's not.
So at the risk of going pretty far out there, I mean, given that China is a largely state-controlled economy, and it's not exactly easy to manufacture nitazines, I wonder if we're looking at something like a state sponsor of terrorism argument here, where they are explicitly permitting a weapon of mass destruction, a weapon of chemical warfare, effectively, to enter our country. Of course, that assumes a lot, some of which I think we should be more careful about. But I really think that we should be worried about how much China knows that it's destabilizing our country, it's killing our people, it's, of course, doing tremendous damage to our workforce. And we ought to be looking into this and really exerting whatever diplomatic pressure we can on the Communist Chinese to stop this stuff. I appreciate your time, all of you. Mr. Urben, I appreciate your answer my questions. I yield.
Senator Reed of Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I first want to begin by commending Chairman Brown and Ranking Member Scott for drafting and bringing to the floor the Fentanyl Act. There was 60 of us that supported it, and as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I tried my best to get it included on the National Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, as I believe Senator Scott indicated, Republicans in the House objected to it, and we have to get it done. I would ask, beginning with Mr. DeFord and the rest of the panel, to just comment on why you think this legislation is so critical and how it would be helpful.
I think, first of all, I think that this piece of legislation is extremely helpful because it's stopping the core of the supply. It's stopping the supply chain and doing everything we can to put a kink in that. But equally, I think any bill that is bringing attention to what I think the most brilliant thing said up here today is when my friend next to me said that, what does it take to make it a crisis? Are we going to wait until it's 500,000 people a year? Because I tell you what, we are really close.
Thank you. Mr. Yoes?
Sir, I think, I mean, the end result is obviously we're seeing what's happening. There's no question. It's here in front of us. And no matter, you know, every minute we take to discuss and argue about what's the proper path to go, we're losing lives and we're losing this war. And the reality is we truly need to pull together and recognize that this transcends political parties and political beliefs.
Now, from the perspective of the police on the street, you see that dimension, but there's another possible dimension, that China's interest is not just to make money, but really to undermine our social fabric in their competition with us. Do you get a sense from this?
Look, you know, my view is a little different. You know, I guess we look at a global perspective here.
Right.
You know, mine's, you know, our members are more focused on how it's affecting our communities. Right. But let's just be honest. There's no way in the world that China doesn't know the damage they're doing that's being done in this country. So you're either you're either fixing the problem or you're part of the problem. So their knowledge of the damage that's done and not taking any action is in fact their action.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Urben, please.
Yes, sir. So the act itself allows for more offensive sanctions and AML compliance. Now it'll benefit law enforcement as it targets money laundering networks too. It takes forfeited Mexican cartel property, Chinese money laundering property, and puts it back into law enforcement investigative operations. There additional funding is needed for opportunities, investigative opportunities that exist right now in terms of taking that data in and networking that data and pushing target packages out to identify the networks and engage them.
And it would help the coordination between federal authorities and local authorities in terms of targeting fentanyl, right?
Absolutely. We want to map the network. It takes a network to defeat this network, right? So these are networked, organized crime activities where you need communication, transportation, and financial transactions for it to work efficiently. And it is working efficiently, unfortunately, and you need to attack all three components to that.
And Mr. Yoes, again, from the perspective of the street officer, you could, I think, concur that, you know, they might not know where all the information is coming from, but they need the information.
No doubt, no question. Information is key.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. This is a critical problem in my home state of Rhode Island. I think we lost, unfortunately, 434 Rhode Islanders, and for the smallest state in the country, that's a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Lummis is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Every state is a border state right now when it comes to fentanyl, including my home state of Wyoming, which one has to pass through both New Mexico and Colorado to get north to Wyoming. But we know that fentanyl, the precursor chemicals, and many of the traffickers themselves are bringing this poison into our country via the southern border. So it's the crisis at the border and the failed policies at the border that are the chief contributor to the deaths of more than 73,000 Americans in 2022. Fentanyl deaths in Wyoming have gone up significantly in recent years. In 2019, there were 11 due to fentanyl overdose. By 2022, that number is risen to 53, and my state has the smallest population of any state in the nation. So this trend across the country is terrifying. Laramie County, which is Cheyenne, is right along I-80, which is a major corridor east to west in the U.S. Last June, police seized more than 9,000 fentanyl pills in a single bust. So we know that Interstate 80 is a corridor for trafficking of these drugs once they get into the United States. So this is a very timely hearing, and I appreciate you all being here today. We also know that when there's a surge in migrants at the southern border, that personnel are focused on processing them, and that takes attention away from the trafficking of drugs. So it has coincided that when there's a surge in illegal migrants crossing the border, there is also a surge in the transport of illegal drugs, fentanyl first and foremost among them. So we've got to get our southern border under control for the sake of Americans who are dying because of our open border policies that will not receive the attention from the current administration that it needs. That said, a couple of questions. Mr. Urben and Mr. Yoes, how well do federal law enforcement agencies, whether it's CBP or ICE, communicate and cooperate with state and local law enforcement when it comes to cases in which seized fentanyl has been traced back to cartels?
So in a general sense, they cooperate well, but in terms of the threat and what we now face, they need to cooperate better. There needs to be more communication. There needs to be the advantage of taking advantage of the data that I talked about earlier. So the individual that was stopped with 9,000 pills, that should be immediately downloaded, taken back to a larger data tank to determine who else that individual was connected with within the network. So whether it's at the border, we can leverage that for interdiction in a moment's notice, or the other individuals that he is connected to within, again, the Mexican cartel network with speed.
Yeah. Now, I'll just add to that the working relationship between DEA and Homeland Security on this issue, the task force, play a pivotal role in our investigation. And we do have a good, strong working relationship and sharing information. Unfortunately, the demand is outpacing what the bandwidth is.
Yeah. So, Mr. Urben, how do we build and use technology so we can understand how cartels are operating and build a map of their activities?
So again, compared to when I targeted them with undercover money laundering activities, with undercovers and wiretaps, right now the opportunity exists to intake that data, right? So whether we have large data tanks that we talked about, whether it's FBI, DEA, HSI, and the individual enforcement that happens out on the street, whether it's a car stop or the arrests, we want to pull that data in, and it'll do two things. One, it maps out the network, because like I talked about earlier, they are connected through transportation, communication, and financial movements of money. Two, with speed, because if you had this platform set up within the federal law enforcement agencies here, you could kick out target packages to the field where they would be enabled to go effect arrests or enforcement.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. My time is up, but I also want to thank you, Mr. DeFord, for using your platform as a celebrity to call attention to this issue. We're grateful for your attendance today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Senator Van Hollen of Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you and the ranking member for your leadership and your legislation, and thank all of you for being here and for your efforts to address this crisis that we're facing. We know that drug cartels manufacture fake pills resembling prescription medications that are laced with lethal doses of fentanyl, and how they cunningly conceal fentanyl within other illicit drugs, knowingly poisoning poisoning Americans for their own profit. To share one devastating story from my home state of Maryland, a young lady, Trinity Ripley, lost her life to accidental fentanyl overdose after consuming a counterfeit pill just before Christmas last year. Trinity was only 18 years old, the daughter of Christine and Vaughn Ripley, who's a council member in the town of Brunswick in Frederick County in Western Maryland. Trinity died the first time she took an illicit pill of any kind. People like Trinity without an opioid tolerance face even greater risks of succumbing to a fentanyl overdose. Her father had spoken to her about these safety issues and the challenge with peer pressure. In his advocacy on these issues, Mr. Ripley has said, quote, "The thing that drives me nuts is that one pill can kill." And now he worries about Trinity's younger brother, Xander, potentially facing the same threat. Mr. Yoes, in 2021, the DEA launched the One Pill Can Kill enforcement effort and public awareness campaign. Can you talk about what specific strategies that state and local law enforcement agencies are using that are, in your view, most effective?
And unfortunately, there are a whole lot of Trinities out there. And you're right, one pill can kill, and we're seeing it over and over and over. On a law enforcement standpoint, we're putting Band-Aids on problems because there's just so much activity taking place. There are really a couple of facets that we haven't talked. We talked a little bit about it, but there's another facet too. It certainly shouldn't be at the expense or taken away from the enforcement side of it. But it's programs like this that are going to, we're talking about the suppliers, and really a lot of this legislation is geared strictly for, towards the, those that are manufacturing, those that are bringing it in. And the reality is we really need to focus on the other side of this as well, how it's affecting our communities and how it's affecting families and the education portion part of it as well.
Thank you. And Mr. DeFord, I've been listening to your testimony from my office and all the testimony. Thank you for the powerful voice you bring to this crisis. Your experience, your voice, your music, not cut across party lines. They bring people together rather than divide them. And as all of us know, nobody cares whether someone who's overdosed from fentanyl is a Democrat, Republican, or anything else. So thank you for your unifying force in addressing this crisis. You mentioned Baltimore City being one of the epicenters of the fentanyl crisis, and that's our state of Maryland, like others, has not escaped this scourge. If you could just say, based on your experience, whether there are any misconceptions that others have about the group of people who end up using or dying from fentanyl, misconceptions that people have that could help us better address this crisis.
Thank you, sir. I want the record to reflect I'm an Orioles fan.
All right.
I think Trinity's story is the main story that we can reference right now about the misunderstanding about drugs in America and about what fentanyl is doing, is that the drug addict is shifting, right? Is that it's not always the drug addicts now. Sometimes it's just the young lady who took a pill the night before Christmas to maybe get sleep, maybe get the anxiety of Christmas off. I don't know Trinity's story, but I'm sure within my spirit, she didn't take that pill to lose her life. And I think that this, excuse my language, but I speak very bluntly, the days of doing cocaine in the bathroom with a stranger are long behind us. My wife and I don't even trust Tylenols that have been opened now. That's how scary of a place we live in. And I think that the biggest misconception about this is that if it hasn't already ended up in your home and you're listening to this thinking it never will, you are wrong. It is on its way to your living room, and I suggest that we stand up and do more as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you for that important message to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Daines of Montana is recognized.
Chairman, thank you. Just on behalf of a bunch of folks in Montana who listen to Jelly Roll a lot, including myself, welcome to the swamp here in D.C. We're glad to have you here. But I prefer listening to you on my pickup back in Montana, Jelly Roll. But I'm very proud of what you are doing as a role model and the message you have right now. People will listen to you, they won't listen to people who wear ties. Thank you. Over the past year, I've had the opportunity to meet with folks across Montana, everywhere else, to discuss the ongoing fentanyl crisis that is wreaking havoc in our communities. I've met with law enforcement, public health officials, tribal leaders, Border Patrol agents, others. They're all saying the same thing. This fentanyl that's flooding across our southern border is reaching our communities in record time and killing Americans at a horrific rate. We don't have the numbers yet for 2023 for Montana finalized, but our Montana drug task forces were on track to seize nearly 500,000 dosage units of fentanyl. That's double last year's record-shattering seizures. This is not just about urban areas. It's not just about states that are close to the southern border. Montana is a northern border state. We border Canada, but we have a southern border crisis. As we've seen the CBP numbers in fiscal 23, they seized enough fentanyl at the southern border to kill the entire population of the United States. These are sobering numbers, and with Jelly Roll's public advocacy and help, just letting people know you don't die from an overdose, you die from poisoning on fentanyl, the smallest amounts. And you take a little packet of Sweet and Low and think of, if that were fentanyl, it's enough to kill 500 people. One of these Montanans whose life was tragically cut short was Riley Schraps, Butte, Montana. It's one more of the tragic stories. He passed away after taking a pill that was laced with fentanyl. Last year, I had the honor of bringing Riley's dad. I brought him, Riley's dad's name's Tom, to be my guest to the President's State of the Union address. Tragically, Riley's story is becoming more and more common as fentanyl continues to infiltrate every corner of every community in America. I'll continue to work with my colleagues in the Senate to clean up this. In many ways, it's a man-made crisis. It's a crisis that starts at the southern border. It starts in Mexico. It starts with the precursors in China as well, and stem the flow of fentanyl in this country so that no more families, no more Montana families have to grieve the loss of a loved one to this drug. Mr. Yoes, in your opinion, has the crisis of the southern border made the job of law enforcement officers harder as it relates to illicit drugs and crime?
I think anytime you have a system where the demand is outpacing the resources, it's always going to be a challenge. And I think we're there. We clearly are. I know that there is some really strong discussion here in the Senate about a solution to the border, and I'm really looking forward to being part of that and learning more of it and being part of that solution. Something we need to recognize that there is damage being done here.
Thank you. Mr. Urben, have Mexican drug cartels taken advantage of the crisis of the southern border to elicit and traffic these illicit drugs in the United States?
Sure, the Mexican cartels are exploiting our border right now. They're trafficking drugs across the border every day, as we talked about. I think in a general sense, we need to turn the border into an asset, into a choke point as it pertains to the transportation of fentanyl. And it takes, like I said it before, a network to defeat a network. So we need to understand how it's getting across, how they're bringing it across, and be able to effectively increase interdiction at the border.
Do you think the administration is doing enough with its current sanctions authority to target the Chinese entities that profit off the sale of fentanyl precursors?
So as I mentioned before, in terms of sanctions, I think sanctions offers a real opportunity in terms of offensive strategies against the chemical precursors and the Chinese entities we need to target. You need to move from 6 to 9 months in an indictment to sanction someone to more like 4 to 6 weeks, and you need to dramatically increase in scale in terms of the numbers of sanctions that you put out.
Jelly Roll, in terms of cartels operating around the United States, what are your thoughts there and what role they're playing right now to get the fentanyl distributed?
You know, it's funny. I've had a complete change in life. I used to side with the criminals, but these days I side with the law. And I believe that it's imperative that we do something about it. The story of the cartel sending drugs to America is a tale as old as time. It's just not as deadly as it is right now. Because to your point, people aren't overdosing because they're doing too much. People are overdosing because they're doing a little.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Warnock of Georgia is recognized.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. I'd like to say to Mr. DeFord, Jelly Roll, I heard your sermon on the CMA, and I was wondering what you're doing on Sunday. You know well from your experience that the war on drugs began in 1971, ushering in federal and state policies that resulted in an explosion of drug-related arrests. Your family's been impacted by this. You've been impacted from 1975 to 2019. The United States prison population ballooned from under 250,000 people to more than 1.4 million. A number that Dr. King, whose birthday we will celebrate in a few days, could not imagine. I often call it the new Jim Crow. The consequences of incarceration can be lasting. In many states, those who have been convicted of drug-related crimes face significant obstacles in finding a job, securing a place to live, even voting. And so the very forms of discrimination against which Dr. King and others fought have been reinscribed within the context of America's criminal justice system. And as I've said before in this committee, my fear is that if we treat addiction simply as a law enforcement problem, we will continue to hollow out entire communities to fill our overcrowded and in some cases privatized prison systems while leaving communities no safer. And so I'd like to ask you, as you've told the story of your past, when you were a teenager, you were arrested and served time in prison for drug-related offenses, including violent ones. How has that felony conviction on your record affected you, a successful rapper, a musician, a songwriter to date?
Yeah, I mean, I carry it in every way you can carry it, Senator. Thanks for asking. There's so many countries I'm not allowed into, which I never thought would matter until I start having hit records in Canada and Germany, and I'm not allowed to go. I'm not allowed to vote. Any core right has been restricted from me. I struggled to buy a home because homeowner insurances were trying to charge me premiums because of my felony. I mean, this thing has hit me in ways that we couldn't describe. I wasn't allowed. I've had neighborhoods where HOAs just flat wouldn't let me live there because of my felony. I have seen the effects of carrying this thing with me. And my state has a violent offender policy where it does zero forgiveness for violent offenses. A crime I committed when I was 15, I'll never be able to get expunged. And I carry that still today.
So you in a real sense are the embodiment of a story of redemption.
Yes, sir.
Know a little bit about redemption, preach about it every week, and you embody that, and yet you live with this cloud over your head, unable to vote and struggling to buy a home.
It's hard to move forward when your past is always in your back pocket.
So thank you for that. I believe that most of the folk who are struggling with addiction need health care and need treatment, not permanent incarceration. There's a way in which, as you describe it, people are shackled even when they're not incarcerated. Do you believe that access to better care, treatment, and resources early on could have kept you out of trouble with the law?
Absolutely. And I want to be very clear that I believe drug addiction is a mental health problem, not a law enforcement problem, just so we're clear on the front end of that. I believe drug dealing is a law enforcement problem. I believe drug addiction is a mental health problem, sir. But I believe if I would have had resources in my juvenile years or more opportunities, or if we focused more on education and loving and less on discipline, especially with our youth, we could get mountains moved.
Well, thank you for your voice on this and ways in which you're using your music and your platform to help people who are dealing with addiction issues. But we need you to help us to get it right in terms of policy. Last year, I pushed for the Fend Off Fentanyl Act to allow for some of the illicit finances reclaimed by the government to go to the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to provide funds for substance use disorder treatment and recovery and diversion programs. The chairman committed to working with me to get my provision in the bill before it goes to the floor. And I look forward to working with Chairman Brown to ensure that this important provision is included before this bill
passes Congress. Again, thank you so much,
sir,
for your voice on such.
I'm not educated enough to speak on this, sir, but I will say I have a feeling there's going to be more than enough money to go around.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Senator Warnock. Senator Britt from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all of our witnesses for taking your time to be here with us today, particularly to talk about such an important issue. I want to echo what several of my colleagues have said. The United States is facing a devastating fentanyl crisis, which is only growing worse on the daily by the crisis we see at our southern border. Now, we know what we need to do when it comes to our southern border. We need to secure it with personnel, more personnel, physical barriers, technological barriers. We got to fix the broken asylum process. We have got to stop the abuse of parole, bolster interior enforcement, execute final orders of removal and catch and release, put back in, remain in Mexico. We owe it to the citizens of our great nation to secure it and to help stop the flow of fentanyl. And make no mistake, this is a national security crisis, an economic crisis, and a humanitarian crisis. The cost on humans is actually heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. The massive influx of fentanyl into the United States has left no community untouched. The day after Christmas, law enforcement in the state of Alabama seized enough fentanyl from 2 individuals in North Alabama to kill every single person in our state's largest 2 cities. And you start to think about that and think about the impact of that just in one seizure. We've heard many stats today. Over 379 million doses of fentanyl were seized across America in 2022, enough to kill every single American or every single Alabamian 75 times over. The results of this poison, it's flooding our country, and we see what's happening. It's clear. There were more than 100,000 overdoses, 112,000 to be exact, in 2023, and fentanyl is now the leading cause of death between the ages of 18 and 45. I think it's critically important that we think about this crisis beyond simple statistics, though. These numbers represent real people. They represent pain. They represent tragedy. They represent loss. They all have faces and stories that are touching every corner of our society. Mr. DeFord, congratulations on your tremendous success. We appreciate you being here today and you sharing your personal story. I want to say, your story is one of salvation, and I am so grateful for your willingness. I think a lot of times people in life just share their peaks. That's all they want you to see. And your willingness to show valleys, and then to show and talk about your relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to talk about climbing out of those valleys, that is going to give somebody else the courage to climb too. And so thank you. Please keep telling your story, and thank you for your willingness to do it here in such a public way today. As we sit here, though, not every family has a story of success like that. There are families that tonight, when they sit down for dinner in Alabama or wherever they may be across the nation, there is going to be a chair where someone should be sitting, where they're not, because of fentanyl poisoning and because of the effects of this drug. And we saw this last year when a 2-year-old, a beautiful little 2-year-old, was found dead in Alabama with fentanyl in her system. And as I've traveled our state and our nation, I routinely hear these stories of heartbreak and tragedy that just are gut-wrenching. And when I was at the border last year, I went to San Diego, and a DEA officer was sitting there talking to us, and they told us the story of a mom who had 2 boys. She had 2. And they broke apart and shared a Percocet, and you'll know this story. And it was laced with fentanyl, and both of those boys died. As a parent, no one should ever go through that. No parent should have to deal with that heartbreak. And so as a mama, I am ready for us to do something now, not tomorrow, today. I think we owe it to the kids across this great nation. And so I just would like to say, I'd like to know from y'all's perspective, where are the gaps? We see technology changing. We see even what China's doing, bringing precursors, getting them to Mexico across our border. We now see them liquefying, fentanyl, all of the things. where are the gaps? And I am almost out of time, so I'll just ask you, where are the gaps in our technology? What do we need to do more of? We'll just go down the line, and then I'll be out of time.
Give the ability for federal law enforcement to wiretap encrypted applications.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need those extra tools to map the organizations and hold them accountable.
And Mr. DeFord, do you have anything to add?
I just want to just add to your sentiment that if the 109,000 people that died in America last year are people, they are humans. Every one of those signified a funeral, a eulogy, a mother, a father, sons, children, cousins, uncles, people just like the people in this room. I think it was really important for you to say that, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jelly roll. Hi. I don't know if any of my colleagues, Mr. Chairman, do you have any ink? But I do, and I'm familiar with your work, and I'm actually a fan of the genre. An Eric Church guy, seen him in concert and everything. So, at any rate, there's no reason you would know me and know my record. But before I became a senator, I was the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, and I was in charge of the pardons process here in my state. And I have made really important part of my platform is I believe in second chances. And I've signed off on thousands and thousands of pardons. And then I believe that, I believe in redemption, and I've made that very critical. And I know you've been very clear about that redemption as well too, and it has infused your work. And I'd like to talk about what do you believe that Americans that are living their best life now deserve a second chance, that they deserve redemption? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest, I would be lying, Senator Fetterman, if I told you that it was just a second chance that I'm here for. God blessed me with a third and a fourth and a fifth. I gave God every reason not to give me another chance, and he did. And I thank God he did, because when he gave me a megaphone, I've made it a point to scream in it as often as possible with not only his praises, but with righting my wrongs. And that's a part of the reason I'm sitting here today. But you are actually one of the few politicians I was familiar with, because you dress like me. Which I think's awesome.
I never give advice on fashion.
Yeah.
No, but no, and I think your message about a second chance really reaches a lot of people that may not be open to that as part of that, and my opponent and the other side really weaponized my standing for a second chance and believing in redemption. And now I've been made I'm easy on crime, and I'm just like, lawless and everything kinds of things, and that's just, of course, not the truth. And I believe two things can be true at the same time, that we must be very smart on crime, and we must have a secure border, and we need to do everything we can to eradicate the scourge of fentanyl. But I also believe that we must have a path for redemption and to be allowed to be made whole again, too, after they've paid their due. And again, you're a tribute to that as well, too. On the other side of that, we cannot ever make our streets safer without the buy-in of the police. And I would just say this, there's a neighborhood in Philadelphia, in my state, Kensington. Kensington is essentially ground zero of fentanyl and the scourge of that. And you will often see that on Fox, and some accuse that of being trank porn and things like that, and I don't agree with that. I've been around Kensington, I've been in it, I've walked around it, it's real, and it's there. And I don't think we can effectively address our national tragedy if we're able to make that successful and make it safe. And we can't do that without the members, Mr. Yoes, of your membership in Philadelphia as well. And I fundamentally also, I want to salute the new mayor, Mayor Parker in Philadelphia. She understands that we have to address the situation there in Kensington, and I would absolutely support that. And I also believe that we cannot demonize our police as well, and we need to make sure they're part of the solution as well too, and I fully support that. And I just wanted to ask, because a lot of the politics that get involved in it, and my belief in a second chance has been weaponized, and member Many members of your membership believe that I'm lawless and I'm not anti-cop and I'm anti-law, and of course that's not the truth. Is it possible that two things can be true at the same time? That we need a strong, fully energized police department, and we also believe that believing in a second chance is actually, it's compatible.
Well, sir, I do agree. I do agree that I think, to some extent, what we're doing is we're modifying behavior to some extent. When illegal behavior, there's there's no question. People, one mistake doesn't mean you throw someone away. Obviously, they're part of society, and I guess the hard line is second, third, fourth, and how many people get hurt along the way. And that's the one that I think we'll all wrap our arms around on just how effective some of this is. You're right. I think you are correct. We need to, when we're all working together and recognizing a problem and finding solutions to those problems, we do find solutions to them. When we don't work together, we do not, and it's a disservice to the people we serve.
Now, Mr. Chairman, 30 seconds more?
Senator Fetterman.
Yeah, no, I believe that, especially in Kensington, and I absolutely support the new mayor's efforts on that. That solution, is we must have possible. It's possible with the police, and I think we also have to understand that we can't necessarily throw away addicts, and that we need to work together on that. And I think that's a base case on addressing our nation and this scourge. So, at any rate, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both.
Fetterman. Senator Butler is Senator Butler is recognized from California.
Chairman, for the hearing and our ranking member on such an incredibly important topic. Thank you all for being here. Representing the state of California, it was also important for me to be here and to be a part of sort of raising the voice and telling the story of 40 million Californians who have been managing the difficulties that this drug has brought to families, both urban and rural, American-born, and those who have immigrated to our great state. And so I want to appreciate all of you all for being here. In California, fentanyl has been the cause of 77% of drug deaths amongst teenagers last year. And we have all talked about the statistics and how they show that overdoses involving fentanyl were behind 1 in 5 deaths of people aged 15 to 24. 1 in 5 deaths behind in those 15 to 24. I think robbing our state and our country, robbing our state and our country of our future. Mr. Jelly Roll, and I join all of my colleagues in just having celebrating your leadership, your voice, your willingness to offer your time, your talent, and your treasure to our country. I also, interestingly, join my colleagues in having listened to your music. And am grateful for the message of redemption as a California girl born in the state of Mississippi. There is nothing better than bringing together all of the genres of music that you bring and telling the story of not just your own journey in life, but your story of redemption and inviting your listeners into a relationship with God. And so I just so appreciate, I also am a parent. And when I listen to the stories of Trinity, or the 2-year-old that has been mentioned by Senator Britt from Alabama, it is hard for me not to think of my own 9-year-old daughter and America's daughters and sons who are going to be faced with this challenge, as has been noted in California. What California did was to, I think, try to speak to some of the issue of education and intervention that you mentioned before. Governor Newsom enacted legislation known in California as Melanie's Law. It came after a deadly fentanyl overdose at Bernstein High School in Hollywood involving a 15-year-old named Melanie Ramos. The law mandates that every public school in California provide training to school employees on opioid prevention and life-saving response under a formal plan known as the Comprehensive School Safety Plan. As a parent, I wanted to just ask, and Senator Daines talked a bit about the whole problem, and I appreciate you recognizing that and calling into the space that we are whole people, and this is a whole problem. I'd love to hear you expound a bit more based on your experience as an addict, as a dealer, and as someone willing to share your story, and as a parent. What more can we be doing, like Melanie's Law, but what more can we be doing to face the whole problem?
Thank you so much. That's an incredible question. I would start with a personal story that's probably more personal than my wife wants me to share, but we have a 15, almost a 16-year-old daughter, and like every 16-year-old, she has recently experimented with marijuana. Nothing to do with this committee, but for the intensive purposes of the story, I'm very pro-marijuana. But it petrified me because she was smoking cartridge pens, and I had heard a story of a cartridge pen having fentanyl in it. And I felt a fear as a father that I've never felt before in that moment. I'll also give you this as a testimony to how I do business personally. I take 10 buses on tour. We run a very big tour, and all 10 buses are required to have testing strips, Narcan, and defibrillators. I put them in all buses. We have sober buses, we have party buses. Even the sober bus gets them because I know sometimes it could be the Trinity effect of one guy relapsed and took one pill and he wasn't ready for it. I think that the act, y'all, the Melanie Act is one that should be across the country. I think that education is so important that these kids don't realize, like I said earlier, the era of when we were children and we could experiment with drugs is not safe for our children no more. There was a time in this country where you could experiment with drugs, and that time is not now. And I think that we have to continue to drive that home. I don't trust my daughter smoking tobacco because if I didn't see it get popped out of the plastic, I don't trust it. And that's sad because now we're living in fear. And nothing is worse for an American than to live in fear.
Thank you so much for that. Because you were willing to tell more than your wife wanted you to, but also because it leads me to my next question from Mr. Yoes. And the interaction with law enforcement. Look, I spent 18 years in the labor movement, and so often there are policy conversations held around our members' profession without the inclusion of the voice of workers at the center of implementing that policy. And so I appreciate your representation on behalf of your members and being a part of this. My question is very much connected to what Mr. DeFord just outlined. And is at its core, the question is, are we doing enough to train and ensure the appropriate supplies for our law enforcement officers to do what they signed up to do, which is save the lives of American children? So often our children are dying by accidental ingestion of fentanyl. They're not seeking to take fentanyl. They are ingesting, counterfeit pills perceived to be something else. Do our officers have what they need? Are we speaking to, is there legislation that you would suggest to ensure, if we're not, or if that we should be doing more? Do our officers need those overdose kits that Mr. DeFord just spoke to?
So to answer your first question, are we doing enough? I think there's 110,000 people for last year, I'm not counting about this year, that say that we're not. Clearly, we're not even coming close. So there's work to be done. There's no law enforcement officer that wants to deal with any of this, much less go to a family and explain to them how some poison that's on the street that we were not able to prevent being there has taken the life of one of their loved ones. So there's a huge challenge here. There's two parts to it, and when we talked considerably about both of them, we're focused right now largely on the supply.
Thank you, Senator Butler.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Finish. You were way over. She was way over. Okay.
The supply. The other side of this is too, and we've talked extensively about it. We need better education of this. There has to be. So on a rank and file officer's standpoint, we can take one part of this and not fix the problem. It has to be. It's going to have to be a holistic approach. And if we don't have a community aspect to this, If we don't have the empowerment of it, of a community being part of the solution, we're not going to fix it. You have the supply and you have the demand. We need to address it on both sides. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Senator Cortez Masto of Nevada is recognized.
Thank you. And thank you, all three of you, for being here, because I think it is important we talk about this holistic approach. From my past experience, and I was Attorney General of Nevada, working with HIDA and addressing, at the time, methamphetamines, and then we had opioids, and now we have fentanyl, and we'll get into that. 80% of the drugs that are consumed that come from Mexico are consumed because the demand is here in the United States. So it is demand along with the supply that we have to address. But here's what is important for me, and I think that's why what you guys are doing is key here. It is the relationship and partnership between law enforcement and our mental health and our substance abuse. It's the healthcare piece of it is key, just like the law enforcement is. And this is why, Mr. DeFord, I just so appreciate you being here. And you said this, that, and this is true for Nevada as well, that I don't think there's anybody that's not touched by this somehow or knows somebody that's been touched by fentanyl or substance abuse in general. And that's why it is important we continue to fund and support both sides of it. So for the benefit of everybody here, I want you to know at the end of 2022, Congress made one of the largest investments in mental health and substance abuse programs. Congress put more than $2 billion in additional money to mental health and substance abuse programs over the past 2 years, and $7.5 billion for substance abuse and mental health services. That was the largest we've ever seen Congress doing. Is it enough? No, but it's a start. Here's my hope, is that as we are talking about these issues, that if you have a challenge, whether it's your physical care, your mental health, or substance abuse, there's a provider that you can go to get help. And you have the funds to do it, and it's accessible, and there's no longer any stigma associated with it. Because it is an illness. It is a problem that we have to address in our communities, and we have to front end and help people. And that's what I'm hearing from all of you as well, is this partnership. But to address the drug trafficking side of it, I am concerned. I was just down at the border. I was down in Arizona. I was at both the Tucson, Nogales, and Lukeville. There is a challenge with the drugs coming across the border, including too much fentanyl. And right now, this administration has $14 billion that they want Congress to support to go through that border, to address not just the drug trafficking, other things that are happening at the border. And I am hopeful that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle recognize that this is important. But here's my question, and I appreciate, Mr. Urben, your comments, because I heard very clearly what else we need to do with respect to law enforcement support, WeChat, wireless app. It takes too long. You and I both know from former law enforcement, the quicker you can get on it and follow the money, then you can stop the trafficking. And it is taking too long. We need laws. So I'm there, and I'm hoping my colleagues hear this as well, and I'm willing to work with them to address that. Mr. Yoes, thank you for everything you do. Let me talk to you about our rural communities, frontier communities, and tribal communities. Because what I know in Nevada, as we address this in some of our major urban areas, there's law enforcement. They're tackling it. They're working with HIDA. They're working with partnerships at the federal, state, and local level. But our rural communities and our tribal communities are challenged, and a lot of these cartels are taking advantage of that in the trafficking. So what else should we be doing? I have a piece of legislation that's called the Invest to Protect Act to give our smaller law enforcement communities the tools that they need for training, for hiring, for working. But people don't realize you can't send undercover into a small community. Everybody knows one another. They're going to know who the undercover is or how they. So can you talk a little bit about that, the needs to address this in some of our rural communities as well?
Well, I think we have this belief that a rural community has less problems, but in reality, that rural community is actually a global community as part of a social network, a social media network. Platforms, and that's where a lot of these drugs are being acquired for. So regardless of whether you think you're in a big city or a small town, you still have the same accessibility. It's still affecting people the same. And I think there's a certain responsibility I think the social media platforms have with this as well. They are providing a vehicle to be able to bring this to communities. What local communities need is they need to recognize that there's no one immune to it. No one, regardless of the size of your community. It's and need resources to be able to do it. I think a lot of it would be easy to suggest that maybe it's not a problem that exists here. It's a mindset. We need to recognize that those resources need to be across the board, regardless of the size of the community.
Thank you. And Mr. Urban, can you talk a little bit about the Mexican cartels? Are they taking advantage of the lack of law enforcement and the geographic challenges in some of the states when it comes to peddling and trafficking in frontier communities or rural communities as well?
Absolutely. The Mexican cartels have infiltrated almost every community in the country. They're taking advantage of us in many different ways, whether it's cities, our transportation system, the ability to launder money through the financial networks here. It's going to take a team-of-team approach to go after the entire network of the Mexican cartels, and we'll also have to affect them within Mexico as well.
And so one final thing, and I thank the chairman because he talked about the support for one of the bills that I have is combating illicit xylazine act, which we now know this xylazine is being cut into this fentanyl, which is just as devastating, even more so. And this is a profit for these cartels. This is where they're making their money. This is a product. They're going to switch whatever product is selling at the time. They're going to switch whatever that product is for that demand. And we need to give the law enforcement the tools they need. One of the things I always get when I introduce legislation from some folks is, well, it's not working, so why do it? Why pass this legislation? The war on drugs is a failure, so why are we doing anything? What's your response to that?
The fentanyl deaths that we spoke about earlier, I would describe as those young teenagers being murdered. We owe them justice. We owe their parents justice. As a federal agent, I'm frustrated by what's going on in the country right now. Everyone that's died from fentanyl overdose or poisoning, the Mexican cartels and anyone that's facilitated that trade needs to be brought to justice. And we want to talk about uniting as a country. We can all unite behind the justice that needs to be imposed on these nefarious actors. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cortez Masto, thank you. Thanks to the three of you for being here today and providing testimony. Senators who wish to submit questions, for the record, those questions are due 1 week from today, Tuesday, January 18th. So the three of you, the witnesses, the three of you, please respond within 45 days of our sending you the questions to respond to any of those. Thank you again. The hearing is adjourned.